Life stories. Biker gang surprises young girl with generosity. You won't believe what happens next. The afternoon sun hung low over the bustling streets of Brookstone Valley, a peaceful neighborhood nestled in the heart of Ohio. 12-year-old Emily Foster stood proudly behind her homemade lemonade stand, her smile as radiant as the neon sign she had painted herself the night before. The sign, reading "Emily's Famous Lemonade, $1 a cup," was decorated with smiley faces and swirls of citrus. Her stand sat outside her modest home, a cozy two-story house with a bright yellow door and a front yard where a large magnolia tree provided shade. Emily had woken up early that morning, eager to prepare for the day, squeezing lemons, measuring sugar, and perfecting her recipe. Though her mom, Michelle, kept an eye on her, this was all Emily's idea, her way of saving enough money for a summer camp trip that she had been dreaming about for months. As Emily stirred the lemonade in a large glass pitcher, the sweet citrus fragrance floated on the warm breeze. She waved enthusiastically at the neighbors passing by. Mrs. Sullivan from 2 doors down was the first to stop by, handing Emily a crisp dollar bill. "This is fantastic, Emily," Mrs. Sullivan said as she took a sip, her smile wide. "You're going to sell out in no time." "Thanks, Mrs. Sullivan," Emily beamed, a rush of excitement filling her chest. Soon, more people stopped by, some honking their horns in support as they drove past. Emily's tip jar started to fill with a mix of coins and bills. By mid-afternoon, she had already earned $20, a promising start toward her goal of $100. Her mom, Michelle, stepped outside to check on her, holding a large sun hat to protect Emily from the heat. "You're doing great, sweetie," Michelle said with a proud grin. Emily's cheeks flushed from the sun as she handed another cup to a customer. "Thanks, Mom. I think I'm getting better at talking to customers, too." But just as Emily handed another cup of lemonade, the familiar sound of engines echoed down the street. The rumble of motorcycles started softly, like a distant hum, but quickly grew louder. Emily squinted, shielding her eyes from the sun, and saw a group of motorcycles coming around the corner. The sun gleamed off their shiny chrome frames. There were at least 6 of them, riders decked out in black leather jackets, helmets, and a few sporting tattoos. The sound of their engines filled the air, and one by one, the bikers slowed to a stop right in front of Emily's lemonade stand. The quiet chatter from nearby had come to a halt, and even Mrs. Sullivan peeked through her curtains to see what was going on. Emily's heart skipped a beat as the largest biker, a tall man with a weathered face and a thick gray beard, swung his leg off his motorcycle. His leather jacket bore patches that Emily couldn't quite make out. His deep voice rumbled like the engine of his bike as he asked, "This where I can find the best lemonade in town?" Emily's mind raced, but she forced a smile, her nerves bubbling under the surface. "Yes, sir, $1 a cup." The biker chuckled, pulled a wrinkled dollar bill from his pocket, and handed it to Emily. "Make it 2, he said, his voice gruff but surprisingly kind. Emily's hands shook slightly as she quickly poured lemonade into 2 paper cups. The air felt charged with tension. Who were these people? Why were they here? As the other bikers dismounted one by one, their heavy boots thudding against the pavement, Emily realized that the situation was not what she expected. They were here, and they were here to stay. The biker who had ordered the drinks took a sip of his lemonade, his expression unreadable for a moment. Finally, he smiled and gave a small nod. "Not bad, kid," he said, his voice breaking the thick silence. "What's your name?" "Emily," she said softly, her gaze shifting to her mom, who was now standing nervously on the front porch. "Well, Emily," the man said, a grin spreading across his face, "I think you've got yourself a new group of customers." He raised his cup for the others to see. "Best lemonade I've had in years." One of the bikers, a woman with long braided hair and a jacket labeled Raven, stepped forward, dropping a $5 bill onto the counter. "I'll take 10 cups for the crew," she said, her voice strong but kind. Emily blinked in surprise. "10 cups?" she stammered. Her hand scrambled to grab more cups as she began to pour as quickly as she could. Her mind raced. This was way beyond anything she had ever imagined. As the bikers gathered around, the initial tension melted into something far more relaxed. They began laughing, joking, and complimenting Emily's lemonade stand, their tough exteriors softening with every sip they took. One biker with a southern accent leaned toward her. "Did you make this yourself, kid?" he asked. "Yes, sir. My mom helped me, but it's my recipe." "That's talent right there," he said, handing her a $20 bill for his 2 cups. The bikers continued to share stories, their laughter echoing through the street, and Emily's nervousness began to fade. She had never imagined that something as simple as selling lemonade could turn into such an event. One of the younger bikers, who looked around 19 or 20, crouched down next to her. "So, what's the lemonade fund for anyway?" he asked, his voice genuinely curious. Emily paused for a moment, then answered, "I'm saving up for a summer camp trip." The group collectively sighed in admiration. Raven shook her head, smiling. "Well, we can't let you go without some extra help, can we?" Before Emily could react, the bikers began passing around a helmet, dropping cash into it like a donation bucket. The sound of coins clinking and bills rustling filled the air. Emily's eyes widened as she watched. When the helmet was finally returned to her, Raven handed it over with a grin. "That should be enough for more than just a camp trip." Emily peeked inside the helmet and gasped. There was easily $300 in cash, far more than she had ever hoped to make in one day. The bikers continued to share stories, their laughter echoing through the street, and Emily's nervousness began to fade. She had never imagined that something as simple as selling lemonade could turn into such an event. One of the younger bikers, who looked around 19 or 20, crouched down next to her. "So, what's the lemonade fund for anyway?" he asked, his voice genuinely curious. Emily paused for a moment, then answered, "I'm saving up for a summer camp trip." The group collectively sighed in admiration. Raven shook her head, smiling. "Well, we can't let you go without some extra help, can we?" Before Emily could react, the bikers began passing around a helmet, dropping cash into it like a donation bucket. The sound of coins clinking and bills rustling filled the air. Emily's eyes widened as she watched. When the helmet was finally returned to her, Raven handed it over with a grin. "That should be enough for more than just a camp trip," she said. Emily peeked inside the helmet and gasped. There was easily $300 in cash, far more than she had ever hoped to make in one day. Thank you so much," Emily exclaimed, her voice trembling with gratitude. "You earned it, kid," the biker leader said, finishing his lemonade. "Hard work deserves support." Just as Emily stood there, holding the helmet filled with cash, one of the bikers, a burly man with a tattoo of an eagle on his arm, grew silent. His weathered face softened, and his gaze shifted to Emily, something in his expression changing. The group quieted, sensing the shift in energy. "You remind me of my daughter," the man said, his voice low and filled with an emotion that caught everyone by surprise. His tough demeanor seemed to melt away as he looked at Emily, his eyes distant. Emily tilted her head. "Your daughter?" she asked softly, unsure of what to say. The man nodded slowly. "She passed away a few years ago. She was about your age. Used to run little stands just like this one," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Seeing you out here, well, it's like seeing a piece of her again." For a moment, the air was thick with emotion. Emily didn't know how to respond. She glanced over at her mom, who had come to stand beside her, her hand resting gently on Emily's shoulder. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Michelle said quietly, her voice filled with compassion. The man gave a bittersweet smile. "Thanks," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Helping you out today feels like honoring her memory. So, thank you too." The group stood in silence for a moment, the playful energy of earlier replaced by a somber respect. Emily wasn't sure what to say next,
but she felt a deep sense of connection to this man and his story. Before anyone could say anything more, the leader of the group clapped his hands, bringing everyone back to the present. "All right, let's not turn this into a cry fest," he said with a chuckle. "We've got more lemonade to buy." The group erupted into laughter, and with it, the mood lightened. As the bikers finished their drinks, one of them called out, "We're going to spread the word about your stand, Emily. By the end of the day, you'll have a line out the door." Emily's heart swelled with gratitude. She had never expected this kind of attention. These bikers, who seemed so intimidating at first, had turned out to be supportive, kind, and full of stories that made her feel like she was part of something much bigger. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles, ready to leave, Emily waved them off. Their engines roared to life, and they sped down the street, their loud engines fading into the distance. But the memory of their visit lingered. It felt like a dream, something that wouldn't fade anytime soon. When the last of the motorcycles disappeared around the corner, Emily stood still, stunned. The helmet filled with cash was still on the counter, and for a brief moment, she couldn't quite grasp the reality of what had just happened. "Well, baby," Michelle said with a soft laugh, breaking the silence, "I think you just made more in one day than most lemonade stands make in a month."
Emily turned to her mom, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Do you think they were serious about spreading the word?" she asked, the excitement bubbling up again. Before Michelle could answer, the sound of car doors slamming and voices carried through the air. A crowd was gathering at the end of the street, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Mr. Stevens, the owner of the local hardware store, and a few of the kids who had been playing basketball earlier. One of the kids, a tall boy named Ben, called out, "Hey Emily, what's all this about? Bikers at your stand?" Emily smiled nervously. "They came by for lemonade, and, well, they kind of bought a lot," she said, gesturing to the helmet of cash with a sheepish grin. "That's an understatement," Michelle added with a laugh, her eyes sparkling with pride. Word of the bikers' visit spread quickly through Brookstone Valley. Within an hour, the line at Emily's stand had grown longer than she ever expected. Neighbors came by to show their support, some curious, others eager to buy a cup of what had now become biker-approved lemonade. As Emily served cup after cup, she couldn't help but notice how the atmosphere around her had shifted. What had started as a quiet afternoon activity had transformed into something far more meaningful. People who rarely interacted with each other were now chatting and laughing, waiting in line to taste the lemonade. A group of parents gathered nearby, swapping stories about their own kids' entrepreneurial ventures. Even the neighborhood kids who had been playing basketball earlier pitched in, holding signs to attract more customers. Emily noticed that Ben and his friends had made a makeshift lemonade-themed banner, complete with a picture of a biker and a lemon. Amidst the growing crowd, Emily spotted a familiar figure standing off to the side, leaning against a tree with his arms crossed. It was Doug, the burly biker who had shared the story about his late daughter. His expression was unreadable, and he stood alone, watching the hustle of the lemonade stand. Emily hesitated for a moment, then turned to her mom. "Do you think he's okay?" she asked quietly. Michelle followed Emily's gaze. "Why don't you go find out? Sometimes people just need someone to listen." Taking a deep breath, Emily grabbed a cup of lemonade and walked over to Doug. Her steps were cautious but filled with determination. When she reached him, she held out the cup, offering it with a small smile. "Here, it's on the house," she said softly. Doug looked down at her in surprise, then smiled, his face softening. He accepted the drink and nodded his thanks. "Thanks, kid," he said, his voice gentle. For a moment, they stood in silence, the noise of the crowd around them fading as Emily finally spoke. "What was your daughter's name?" Doug's eyes flickered with sadness, but after a moment, he answered, "Amelia. Everyone called her Mia. She used to sell lemonade and cookies too, just like this. Always had big dreams." Emily smiled gently. "I bet she made really good cookies." Doug chuckled, a bittersweet sound. "The best," he said quietly. "She always said she'd open her own bakery someday, but she never got the chance. Emily didn't know what to say, but her heart ached for Doug. She looked down at her lemonade stand, where the crowd continued to bustle. An idea began to form in her mind. "Do you think maybe helping me today was like helping her in a way?" she asked softly. Doug's eyes softened even more, and he nodded slowly. "Yeah, kid, I think it was." The afternoon sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the neighborhood as Emily continued serving lemonade to an ever-growing line of customers. The excitement around her stand had become something bigger than she ever imagined. The bikers had truly kept their word. People from all corners of Brookstone Valley had come to show their support, and the stand had become a symbol of something deeper, a gathering point for the community. Among the crowd, Emily noticed more familiar faces. Neighbors who rarely spoke to one another were now exchanging stories and laughing together, some even taking photos to remember the moment. The crowd was so large that people had started lining up down the block, eager to try the now famous biker-approved lemonade. The whole street seemed alive with energy. "Wow, look at this crowd," Michelle said, her voice filled with amazement as she peeked out the front door. "Emily, you're going to need an assembly line." Emily laughed, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Though she was slightly overwhelmed by the sheer number of people, her heart swelled with pride. Her best friend Chloe had come by to help, and together they worked as fast as they could to keep up with the demand for lemonade. They filled cups, exchanged stories with customers, and made sure everyone had what they needed. "I think we need a bigger pitcher," Chloe joked, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. Just then, a familiar roar of motorcycles echoed down the street. Emily's eyes widened as the sound grew louder, and soon the group of bikers appeared again, this time with even more of their crew. They parked their motorcycles neatly along the street and waved to the crowd like local celebrities. "We couldn't stay away," called out with a grin, dismounting his bike and approaching Emily with a large box in his hands. "Thought these might go well with your lemonade," he said, handing her the box of freshly baked cookies. The bikers jumped into action, helping to manage the growing line of customers. Some entertained the kids who had gathered to gawk at their motorcycles, while others helped serve lemonade, their friendly banter filling the air. Sherry, the biker with the long braided hair, even took out her camera and began snapping photos of Emily and her stand, capturing the growing energy of the moment. "I think we just broke the record for the busiest lemonade stand in Brookstone Valley," Sherry laughed, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Emily couldn't believe her ears. The line was so long now, it stretched almost all the way down the street. People were coming from every direction, some just to support her, others because they had heard about the bikers' generous act. Emily's heart swelled as she thought about the difference these bikers had made. What started as a small lemonade stand had turned into an event that brought the entire neighborhood together. As the day wore on, more and more people joined in. Carlos, who owned the local hardware store, came by with a crisp $20 bill and a huge grin. "I heard about what happened yesterday," he said, handing her the bill. "We need more kids like you in this world." "Thank you, Mr. Carlos," Emily replied, her hands sticky from pouring lemonade non-stop. The crowd didn't seem to slow down at all. At that point, Michelle stepped in to help keep things organized. She made several trips to the kitchen to whip up more lemonade, while Emily and Chloe kept filling cups and chatting with customers. Some of the neighborhood kids even pitched in, holding signs at the street corners to direct more people to the stand. "We've got quite the operation here," Chloe laughed, clearly enjoying the buzz of activity. But even as they worked together to keep things running smoothly, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about selling lemonade anymore. It was about the connections being made, the shared experiences, the kindness passed between strangers, and the way the community was coming together. Emily thought about Doug again, standing on the edge of the crowd, watching everything unfold. His presence felt like a quiet anchor in the midst of all the excitement. By mid-afternoon, the stand was running low on supplies, but Emily's spirits were high. She had already raised far more than her original goal of $50 for the zoo trip.
and every new customer seemed to bring more warmth and energy to the event. "I think we need a bigger pitcher," Chloe joked again, her face flushed from the heat of the sun. But before Emily could respond, the roar of motorcycles filled the air once more. The bikers had returned, this time with even more of their crew in tow. They dismounted, laughing and chatting as they made their way to the stand. Doug, as always, was at the forefront, holding a large bag of fresh cookies. "We couldn't stay away," he said with a wink. "Thought you might need some treats to go with that famous lemonade of yours." The bikers began to jump into action, helping to manage the growing crowd and entertain the children who had gathered around to admire their motorcycles. Sherry, the one who had taken so many pictures earlier, snapped more, capturing moments of Emily's hard work and the bustling atmosphere. "I think we've officially broken the record for the busiest lemonade stand in Indiana," Sherry laughed as she took another photo of Emily with a crowd of eager customers. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the street, the crowd around Emily's lemonade stand showed no sign of letting up. The bikers were still there, helping to keep the flow of customers smooth, and Emily's stand had become the heart of Brookstone Valley for the day. There was a special energy in the air, a sense of connection and community that hadn't been there before.
As the evening wore on, Carlos and a few of the other neighbors suggested an unexpected idea. "You've got a good thing going here, Emily," Carlos said, handing her another generous tip. "What if we made this a regular event? Maybe once a month we could set up stands like this all over town and donate the money to local kids programs." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean like a lemonade day?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Exactly," Carlos replied with a smile. "You could be the inspiration for it. Just think, kids from all over could set up lemonade stands, raise money for their school trips, sports, or any number of things. It could change the whole community." The crowd erupted in applause, and Emily felt a warm glow spread through her chest. She had started the day with a small, simple goal to raise enough money for her zoo trip, but now it seemed her lemonade stand had become something bigger, something that could have a lasting impact on the whole town. "I'd love to do that," Emily said, her voice full of excitement. "We could help so many kids who need it." Her mom, Michelle, stepped over and wrapped her arm around Emily. "I think that's a wonderful idea. You've created something beautiful today, Emily." Emily smiled up at her mom, grateful for all the support she'd received. But just as she was starting to feel the weight of what she'd accomplished, the bikers began to prepare to leave. Doug, the quiet one with the eagle tattoo, walked over to her one last time. His face was serious, but his eyes were soft with kindness. "Emily," he said gently, "you're proof that even the smallest ideas can bring people together. Keep dreaming big, okay?" Emily nodded, her heart full. "I will. Thank you, Doug, for everything." Doug placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip warm and reassuring. "You've got a good heart, kid. Don't ever lose that." As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and revved their engines for one final ride, Emily stood at the edge of her lemonade stand, watching them go. The sound of their engines grew fainter, and soon they were gone, leaving behind only the memory of their kindness. As Emily turned to look at the now empty stand, she noticed a small folded note tucked under the helmet full of cash. She picked it up carefully, her fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded it. Inside was a handwritten message. "For the brightest light on a summer's day, keep shining." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She handed the note to her mom, her voice shaky with emotion. "They didn't have to do all this," she whispered. "No, but they wanted to," Michelle replied softly, pulling Emily into a warm hug. "That's what makes it so special." The sun was setting now, casting a soft glow over the neighborhood. The buzz around Emily's lemonade stand had faded, but the sense of community that had been created would last much longer. It wasn't just about lemonade or money, it was about the kindness that had been shared, the connections that had been made, and the lives that had been touched. As the last of the bikers rode off into the distance,
Emily stood next to her mom, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The day had started with a simple dream, but it had grown into something far greater, a lesson in generosity, the power of community, and the unexpected ways that people can change each other's lives. Michelle looked down at Emily and smiled. "So, how does it feel to have run the most successful lemonade stand Brookstone Valley has ever seen?" Emily chuckled, taking a sip of the lemonade that was left in her cup. "It feels amazing," she said, her voice full of wonder. "But not just because of the money. I didn't know something this small could bring so many people together." Michelle nodded, her eyes warm with pride. "That's the power of kindness, Emily. When you give, even in small ways, it inspires others to do the same. And when people come together, big things can happen." As the last light of the day faded and the stars began to twinkle above, Emily sat on the porch steps, a helmet full of cash beside her. She thought about Doug, his words, and how much his kindness had meant to her. "Mom," Emily said, her voice thoughtful, "do you think we could donate some of this money? Maybe help kids who can't afford school trips or supplies?" Michelle's eyes lit up with pride. "I think that's a wonderful idea. You've got a big heart, Emily." As Emily thought about Doug's daughter, Mia, and the way the bikers had rallied behind her cause, she felt a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't just about a summer day in a lemonade stand. It was about creating something that could inspire others to believe that anything is possible. With the stars shining overhead, Emily looked at her stand, packed away for the night, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her dream had grown into something much more than she had ever expected, and she knew that this was just the beginning of something amazing. Lessons learned. The story of Emily and her lemonade stand offers several important life lessons. First, it highlights the power of small actions and how even the simplest ideas can have a profound impact. Emily's initial goal of raising money for a school trip turned into something much greater, a community event that brought people together. This teaches us that when we pursue our goals with passion and sincerity, we can inspire others and create unexpected connections. Another key lesson is the importance of generosity and kindness. The bikers, despite their tough appearance, showed that kindness can come from the most unexpected places. The story also reminds us that community matters. By coming together and supporting one another, we can create a sense of unity that leads to positive change. Finally, the story teaches us that dreams, no matter how small or big, can shape our reality. By staying focused on our goals and being open to unexpected opportunities, we can make a lasting difference, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of others.
If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps more people discover our content. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next videos.